Hey everyone, I'm Mork and I make minis in HeroForge. This week's mini is a Warforged character. Now, the reason why I decided to build a Warforged is because I'm in contact with one of the dungeon masters, and one of the ideas of how the dungeon master wants to run the games is that you cannot really like long rest in heavy armor or you're gonna get like exhaustion. So my mind immediately went to scenarios of how can I like cheat this sort of a thing so that my character can rest in heavy armor. And one of those is like a Warforged. So Warforged are kind of like the robots of the D&D world. They're kind of specific to the Eberron campaign, but they're generally speaking kind of accepted in all of the worlds, I would say. So this Warforge, I imagine, is powered by magma elemental energy. And I kind of imagine that he was built probably by some dwarves who probably had like access to like the lava flows and stuff like that. Maybe they were like cooperating with some gnomes, like World of Warcraft style, and the gnomes helped build this sort of a thing. This guy's called Sentry 8. I kind of imagine his story begins in a repair bay where he was left behind like 1,000 years ago. And after those 1,000 years, he kind of comes back to life when the party finds him. The entire civilization that made him is completely gone. He's called Sentry 8 because there were like previous sentries and like sentries after him. And I kind of imagine that his backstory just gets kind of like revealed through like chips that he like slots inside of himself just to see what the previous sentries experienced. So that's kind of like what I imagine. So let's talk about the mini itself. Maybe let's start a little bit with the environment. So for the base, I'm kind of like using like the metal floor, but it's like littered with like these volcanic rocks, which have like some of these lava crystals poking out. And I imagine like these lava crystals are the energy source which get like harvested in order for you to make this sort of a Warforged. And the area I kind of imagine is a little bit run down. I can imagine that it can be a little bit moist since we have like mushrooms growing here. And this sort of a stuff, like this ancient age, I also wanted to show on the Warforged itself. So it has also like some mushrooms growing on its body. And also you can see like a crystal here. Now the fun fact about this crystal is that I just use it here to hide like this geometric abomination that is poking through his body. I want to get rid of it, and I figured this does a pretty good job at that and I really like it. Regarding the lava elements, it was pretty fun to like put these like lava effects, also like poke through the armor so you can see like you can see some of the lava here, you can see some of the lava in the inside of the eyes, you can also see it here in the back of the mouth. You can also see it here on these shoulder plates, and you can also see it, for example, here in the heat gauge and this sort of an armrest here and here. You can also see it here, and I imagine this backpack is sort of like an engine that he has that powers him. So this character, D&D, Dungeons and Dragons wise, is a champion fighter. So champion fighters are known for like their critical strikes. And one thing that synergizes with critical strikes are piercing weapons. In this case, I either imagine that on this hand, he has either like a rapier or a lance. I guess it can be like kind of both things. And on this hand, he's got like a heavy crossbow. It kind of looks like a hand crossbow, but I kind of imagine that it's actually like a heavy crossbow because he's like a pretty colossal guy. So like one thing about the Warforged is that they are able to integrate like the heavy armor into its own body. So one thing that I also wanted to do for this Warforged is integrate these weapons into their own body. And you can see it, for example, here with this sort of a heavy lance. So the way I kind of like made it, you can kind of see that there are like these sort of like intersections, and one is smaller than the other one. And I just kind of imagine that this blade, you're able to like extend it or like pull it back whenever you want. And the way I did this is just by stacking like different blades on top of each other. So here we have like the longest blade, but also the thinnest blade. Then we have the middle one, which is like middle length, and then we have this one. Yeah. So by stacking all of these on top of each other, I was able to create this like sort of an effect where it's like stacked. Stacked. And I just kind of imagine that when he is not using this blade, all of it just goes inside of here. Same kind of thing here for this crossbow. I just kind of imagine that normally this crossbow is kind of like inside of this arm, and he's able to pull it out. And I kind of imagine this crossbow to have like some sort of like an automatic mechanism. You can see that the design of the crossbow itself is a little bit strange because it is actually using springs. Like when I thought about crossbows, I didn't really want to use like a classic string. I believe crossbows just use like straight up string or something like that. I didn't want to use that because I just kind of thought it would not be appropriate for like a lava themed character. Which at some point I was like, damn, am I creating like a bionicle? Sorry, this is like, I'm not entirely sure how it is supposed to be working, but I'm pretty sure that whoever engineered it probably did it for a purpose that it like made actual sense. I just kind of imagine that like these two thingies here, they just kind of like help with reloading and like drawing new bolts inside of it. You can see like one of the bolts here. Yeah. So if you're actually like an engineer out there, I'm curious like how this sort of a crossbow could potentially function, because I'm not entirely sure, but it does look cool. And that's pretty important. And I also just wanted to add in some sort of like an opponent for this Warforged, so I added in like a cobra who's having a terrible day meeting this Warforged because it has no chance, you know. Its best target are probably just these mushrooms that are growing on top of the Warforged. And I just kind of wanted the cobra to pay attention to the first thing it sees or that it feels like threatened by. In this case, it's like this sort of a blade because it's almost like in its face, and this Warforged is just like in sort of a relaxed pose, and it's just like kind of like analyzing the creature. And currently he's just kind of like deciding whether he wants to use the crossbow to kill it. You can see the loaded up bolt. He's just deciding if he wants to use the crossbow to kill it or not. So yeah, that's the Warforged. Magma Elemental Warforged. Let's take a look at some previous versions of this character. So I would say this was like the very first version, and I'm kind of combining here the regular robot face with the fungal features to create like this sort of an effect on the head. And then I added like these robotic limbs with like claws. I was really liking these claws, so that's why I just kind of wanted to implement them. And then I had the idea to use the crystalline torso and legs, I figured that I don't ever really use this one, so I figured it could be like kind of fun to do so. You can kind of see very early on that I just more or less found all the parts immediately that I wanted to use. You can see that also the snake makes it here early on. And I would say this was the first attempt at the color scheme, so really all of it just kind of came very early on. The idea for the pose also just kind of came in quickly to my head. I don't necessarily have like any pose issues with this guy, though he does look a little bit derpy right now. You can see the idea of the lance forming here and also the crossbow. At this point the blade was still just one piece, and I kind of started working on the environment to look volcanic and stuff. Now at first I wanted to make the environment a sort of like a rundown jungle covered with vines, but the vine options just kind of suck in HeroForge, so I didn't end up doing that. Then I added an orange glow to the mini, which I feel like this really makes the mini come more alive, especially like when it lingers on the metal. So here I finished the blade properly, and then I started working on the crossbow. At first it was looking rather basic, but I just kept like adding to it more and more. And after a while I managed to construct this crossbow. So this crossbow is kit bashed out of like several parts. So this thing right here, for example, are like scrolls. Right, I kind of like borrowed this idea from my gun video that Folios has. And then we have like this heat gauge thingy. And these thingies, like stuff like this, like these small components, I just really appreciate that like HeroForge added those. I find them very useful. For example, I'm also like using like these screws right on this armor. So normally this armor that just has exactly nothing here. They felt like the perfect like thing to put in, and I just really love how this looks. And if we take this crossbow apart, then we also have like stuff like this here and stuff like this here. And I believe these are like chocolate bars, wrapped chocolates, you know. And then we have like the crossbow itself, which is kind of like integrated into this arm piece itself. And this is just like a bolt. Yeah, that's the crossbow. So this is where I added the springs. So we have some more chocolate boxes, one here and one here. And these springs are made of 2 springs. So one is here, one is here. They are made in such a way so that they connect. You can see that they are able to connect right here. So I believe it should be fine. I believe it should be fine. I'm not sure how good this is actually. How good this would actually work out if this was like printed. I don't have like much faith in these springs, I'll be honest, if they got printed. And that's it for the mini. This particular mini didn't feel like completely like complex. I mean, it was just kind of like a lot of work, like setting up the blade and then building the crossbow itself. But other than that, I felt like the minis was kind of like building itself, and that's often just like very enjoyable. Let me know what you guys think, and yeah, the next miniature that's gonna be presented is gonna be for the tiefling fans, especially those tiefling fans that enjoy incubi. All right, everybody, take care and bye bye.